Of the 10 guilds of Ravnica, the Simic are the group that we are maybe most invited to laugh at. Like with the Is It, there's a certain level of hubris and gonzo energy to their experimentation. And I think we can all agree that, guys, you can just, leave the reptiles alone for just like 5 minutes. But if the Is It at their core are only concerned with the bulk production of lightning bolts, we might instead find a more humanitarian concern at the center of the Simic's belief system. And call me crazy, but I think this guild can actually provide a meaningful path forward for our own medical research. As we move deeper into a new century, we might learn that the healthcare of the future will ask us to be as broad-minded about our bodies as they are. To not think so much of our physical selves as individual castles to be protected, but instead as pods of a much larger, interconnected organism. We like to think of our bodies as purified temples, but as the medical writer Eula Biss notes in her work on vaccines, even something as seemingly sacred as a mother's milk is always already deeply interlaced with its surroundings. Our breast milk, it turns out, is as polluted as our environment. It contains paint thinners, dry cleaning fluids, flame retardants, pesticides, and rocket fuel, if only in trace amounts. The point here is not to scare you away from milk, but to acknowledge that we are much more porous than we believe, and that thinking of health on an individual level fails to account for how much of a shared project it really is. Biss wants to caution us away from thinking of health as an identity. I'm healthy, we say, meaning that we eat certain foods and avoid others, that we exercise and do not smoke. Health, it is implied, is the reward for living the way we live. And it's certainly true that we should strive to keep our bodies in good condition. But in doing so, we also need to accept that we are part of something larger that also needs maintaining. And unfortunately, in some ways, medicine has pushed us away from that responsibility. The method in which healthcare has developed over the past century has encouraged us to think of our bodies as individual units in which disease can be located and eliminated. The oncologist Siddhartha Mukherjee tracks this mindset back to the invention of the antibiotic.
Here you had a chemical, either from the natural world or artificially synthesized in the laboratory, and it would course through your body. It would find its target, lock into its target, a microbe or some part of a microbe, and you would end up taking a previously fatal, lethal disease, a pneumonia, syphilis, tuberculosis, and transforming that into a curable or treatable illness.
The development of antibiotics was without a doubt a huge tidal shift in the history of medicine that has saved countless lives since its development. But it has also warped all of pharmacology around its core treatment strategy, to the point where
Then we've thought about illness and treatment in terms of a profoundly simple model. In fact, the model's so simple that you could summarize it in 6 words. Have disease, take pill, kill something.
It's easy to see why this method is so seductive. We want medicine to swoop in like a superhero, taking decisive action in the face of illness, which often reminds us of just how fragile we are. The problem is that we've tried to replicate this strategy again and again with non-infectious diseases like diabetes, hypertension, and heart disease.
And it's worked, but it's only worked partly.
The issue being that the full scope of medical chemistry has a pretty limited area of influence. It's estimated that there are a little under 1 million possible physiological reactions in the human body, and we can meaningfully interact with just 0.025% of them, which is a pretty humbling statistic. Just wanted to stop here to say that I actually take a combination of chemotherapy and immunosuppressants to deal with the disease that I have, which means that I'm in a population that is particularly underserved by the old treatment models. Just wanted to include that because I think it colors my opinion, even if it doesn't discount it. Okay, back to it. But this isn't a video about a dystopian medical future. It's a video about how we should rethink healthcare and how the Simic can help us to imagine that space. Mukherjee's answer to the conundrum he's established is to reverse the telescope. Instead of zooming in to the level of cells, he suggests we zoom out, first to the organism itself, and then to the environment which it inhabits. And if you're like me, when you first hear it, that sounds like some hippie nonsense. The sad truth is, it might be easier to understand first in a negative context.
But let me give you an example of a profoundly carcinogenic environment. It's called a prison. You take loneliness, you take depression, you take confinement, and you add to that, rolled up in a little white sheet of paper, one of the most potent neurostimulants that we know, called nicotine, and you have a pro-carcinogenic environment. But you can have anti-carcinogenic environments too.
Mukherjee's example being the altered hormonal states currently being used to treat breast cancer. What's being described here is a radical change in the way we conceive of professional medicine. If the emblematic medical figure of the past century has been the surgeon that can target and eliminate specific points of illness, this new model is more of a cultivator that nurtures a chemical, hormonal, and psychological space in which healing can happen. Now, I'm not saying pills are going to disappear overnight. I'm just saying that to meet the medical challenges of the 21st century, we may need to develop new methods of treatment in addition to our tried and true routines. And this way, I think we can learn a lot from the Simic. If there's one thing to take away from this guild, it's their ability to see very little distinction between their own individual bodies and the environments that surround them. They are drawn to the major sinkholes of Ravnica, likely because they are highly active biomes, full of life and chemical diversity. And their physical adaptations, in which they meld their own anatomy with other living beings, are aspirational in nature. At least when it's not being used to make giant mutant death lizards. They enmesh their biology with the world around them to better approximate a utopian ideal of the deep synthesis between society and nature. The Simic would likely hum in agreement with Mukherjee's closing statement.
What's really at stake, perhaps, here is not the medicine itself, but a metaphor. Rather than killing something, in the case of the great chronic degenerative diseases, kidney failure, diabetes, hypertension, osteoarthritis, maybe what we really need to do is change the metaphor to growing something.
That word, to grow, is both the operative verb of the Simic Guild and the great challenge set before us. In the past, huge medical shifts have often come at the cost of the suffering of minority groups. Readers of Harriet Washington's Medical Apartheid will know that our contemporary understanding of birth control and gynecology is rooted in projects to sterilize African American women. And many of the changes Mukherjee proposes might be arrived at through the social engagement of trans people advocating for better hormonal treatment. Few groups know quite as well that our physical selves are not isolated kingdoms, that we exist on a spectrum of development as part of a long social tradition and in a specific environment, all of which we can impact and change. We will all be the beneficiaries of their courage. I think we would do well to remember it. We come with a common destiny, to have a body, but from the moment of birth, an almost infinite series of permutations continuously serve to alter that shared fate and begin to separate us in both minor and major ways. Some bodies find a better home in this life than others. Some bodies struggle to carve out their own safe spaces. If medicine is the project of promoting better health, then it must continuously adapt itself to new avenues of care, or risk leaving behind those that it fails to recognize. But I believe we can build a better world. And the place to start is with growth.
What a fantastic moment in the featurette area. Autumn is bombed by their friends and supporters. Beautiful stuff.